I'm Rob Sarney, and you're listening to What the Heck Fintech, where you'll experience and learn that Fintech is Fin Life. Let's get started. Welcome back to Part 2 with Jagathi. If you didn't hear Part 1, please go back and listen to how Jagathi started and why she started Fintech Women and how mentors shaped her career. So I'd love to pivot a little bit here. Sure. I'd love to talk about the tech a little bit now. Now, AI is huge, and I know you're big into AI. That's one of your big focus on many technologies. But AI, you're an expert. So I'd love to hear your take, AI and fintech, and where are we going, and how can we do better?
Yeah, that's like all the other questions. Another good one. You're right about AI being very close to my heart these days. So I grew up with a whole bunch of technologies, of course, like anybody that worked in technology, and professionally, what I'm focusing on right now is helping kind of the mid-sized organizations look at AI not as a tech solution, but a partner, a chief of staff for the CEO, nervous system for an organization. How do you bring a technology like that into your business and continually evolve through that? So that's what I'm doing professionally, which is giving me a lot of reason to think about AI and what it does, and particularly in financial services, because it goes back to the point I made earlier. It's all about money and movement of money. And you say this often, fintech is fin life. I completely agree with that. I think it's 100% absolutely true, because every part of what we do is tied to money. And it's interesting. I mentioned before I grew up in India, and India was a cash society for so long. Credit cards came much later than it came in the US, as an example. But in the last, let's say 10 years, decade, India has leapfrogged to digital payments, and they're doing fantastically well. I remember the first time I saw this a few years ago, where produce hawkers with their phones had a scan code amongst the vegetables and other produce they had, and anybody buying would scan that code and pay the money. And that was fascinating, because we weren't doing that. We still aren't doing that in the US. So it's kind of interesting. I think when it comes to fintech particularly, and then I'll talk about connect the dots with AI and fintech as I see it in kind of my view of the world for what that is. I think fintech is evolving at a different pace all across the world. When you look at something like Singapore, because of how that city-state is structured, again, they are much ahead than many other of the what we think of technologically developed worlds. When you look at Africa, because there's a need, and they've been able to leapfrog using their phones as payment systems, they've been able to leapfrog so many of what we think as traditional Western technologically advanced societies are not there yet. But however, the risks to all of this also exist. And so especially for financial services, so much of what financial services does is risk management. Risk from, whether it's regulatory risk or it's the other 4 or 5 types of strategic operational risk that an organization looks like. A lot of what financial services does is risk management, which kind of makes sense because they're holding people's money. Of course, they have to be risk averse in doing what they do. So if you kind of think of these pockets across the world, and then you look at where the larger financial services organizations are set up, which is, again, the Western world for most part. And they started adopting technology, as we spoke a little earlier, over the decades. There is a lot of tech debt, as we say, that they hold. What AI has the ability to do, and when I say AI, I'm not just talking about LLMs like ChatGPT and such, but when you just look broadly across all types of AI, even going, I think of it as a tech stack where RPA is at the bottom, and then we kind of step ladder all the way up to perhaps Gen AI, but you can go further out as well. But when you kind of look at all of that, I think what AI has the opportunity or offers as the holy grail here is that it can connect through all of this without really spending money on upgrading every single technology that you have. So if, for instance, there's a financial institution that has 40 years old mainframes and COBOL running on them, which has some important information even today that is used, then they can continue to use that with a layer of something, with a layer of AI on top to connect that information and increase the speed with which they deliver information, whether across the operations or to their consumer, which then puts them in 2025 and beyond in terms of providing that value to customer. I think it's also interesting that the expectations of the customer is growing. So the customer experience has to be 2025 and beyond, even if the infrastructure at the back is aging or has aged for a while, right? So I look at AI as having the potential to touch all of these various systems, along with improving the maturity of processes and workflows, and bringing together all of that information from workflows. When I remember going into one of my early days in the US, going into a bank, and I had the banker I was working with use a calculator at the final stage to give me the information I wanted. And that kind of band-aid is okay if the customer is in the same place, but customers are using chat GPTs and everything else and getting fingertip information at their fingertips. So the customer experience needs to meet where customers are. And so I think AI has the potential, if deployed correct, if strategically understood by the leadership and deployed correctly, has the ability to connect all of this and lowering the operating effort, operating costs, operating margins, and increasing value to customers. And also, in the midst of all of this, allowing banks to do a better job as being a custodian of people's money, which they always were, as well as a custodian of people's data, which now they are.
Yeah. Wow. I've seen you I've had the opportunity to hear you speak on AI in a few different forums now. And I love, and I steal this all the time. I love it, is that, AI is just a tool to help get us more efficient, to make us more efficient. I use that so much. It's an easy, down to earth framing that I stole from you. So I know you can explain it way better than I could, because I stole it from you.
You're right. I mean, AI is definitely just a tool. In fact, while I did study technology, I don't always keep up to date. But with AI, I have been going, particularly with LLMs, I have been going behind the curtain again to understand really what's happening. And all of us give personality to chat. I use Chat GPT multiple times a day, and I've created my own custom GPTs to help allow me to do certain things. But what's interesting is I always give a custom GPT a name. And then when I shared this with my friends, family, and network, they give it personality. Yes, I did give instructions to have a personality, but they give it personality. So we're giving technology personality and thinking the technology is human. But fundamentally, what's happening with an LLM is it's a series of tokens. LLM does not remember anything. It's every time we say something, it either tags those words and retains that tag, not memory. And then it pulls those tags when a question is asked, pulls at those tags when the question is asked. For example, I said, hey, I want you to, and it does tell you this. If you're working with ChatGPT, it does tell you that, but we don't pay attention to it. So I tell ChatGPT every now and then, hey, can you store this in memory? I want to pull it later. And it will tell me that, look, I can't. However, I'll tag it like this, and the next time you want it, I can pull that tag out. So it is completely both a resource as well. It's a tool, but it has a lot of potential, and I think the potential today comes in a big way from the computational power that we have at our fingertips, right? I mean, NVIDIA processors are like this big these days. We think of mainframes. I'm not going to age you and me, but I think we grew up around the same generation where a computer took up an entire room and you had to get special access to go in there and things like that. So today, computational power allows for essentially what it is, the calculations to happen at hyperspeed, and therefore we get this kind of feeling that we are talking to a human. And I think that's what sometimes makes us forget that this is a tool, a technology. It was easier with web services and SaaS solutions because, yeah, it was code. We know somebody sat and wrote the code, and then you got an output. But with AI, I think that's a risk. And I think you're right. We should keep reminding everybody that it is a tool at the end of the day. And what you do with it has to be carefully thought out.
That's great. I love that framing. Okay, awesome. So you're out and about. You're out across the ecosystem, multiple events going on. You were telling me about a few of them.
Yes.
So our audience can connect with you, talk with you, learn from you, get mentored, coach from you. What events do you have going on that you're going to be a part of, either speaking at or supporting or whatever? Because we got a lot of events coming up, and I know you're involved in many of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking for I think that I'm on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. Tell me where you got to know me, so I'll make the connection quickly, and then we'll talk. So that's a simple one. Going beyond that, wearing my Fintech Women hat for a minute, I would say we're working towards our big fall marquee event in November 20th. We have Real Talk 2025, which is going to be a half a day conference. And we're going to have about 4 fantastic tracks with keynotes and networking after. So anybody that's listening, either connect with us at fintechwomenusa.com or send us an email on LinkedIn. We have a group on LinkedIn, and so just connect with us any which way, and we'll make sure that you're invited to it. And then, and a point to mention is all our events are at no cost to the audience. All we ask in return is that audience, if they make a commitment, they come, so that we can always make sure people who are totally interested are in the room at every given event that we have. So our events are at no cost, and the content is always good. Well, we hope it's good because we take the effort to make sure new voices are always brought in to have conversations, even if the conversation is the same. A new person gives a different perspective. So we kind of work towards getting all of that together. So November 20th is definitely something, and encourage everybody to pay attention to that, and please join us. In September, as you know, so many cool things are happening in Boston. The Boston Blockchain Week, there's a Startup Week, AI Week, Fintech Week, and we are supporting all our partners through these. So as part of Boston Blockchain Week, we're working with them to bring some speakers, perhaps host a panel. Same thing with Boston AI Week. We're supporting the hackathon and trying that Top Contenders is hosting, and perhaps bring students into that mix along with access to mentors. We have this fantastic new relationship that we are building together with an organization called Girl Hacks, and their reach is also quite impressive. So we are hoping to bring our community into all of these events. And at FinTech, in fact, in September, we are talking with Goodwin, who's hosting a FinTech forum on the 18th, and perhaps supporting one of their panels. We'll see what form it is. But if folks are listening to this in September, going into November, look for us at all these events, whether it's myself or somebody else from a community, perhaps our student communities at Halt or at Suffolk. There'll be a whole bunch of people for sure. So look for us and come say hello. We can talk more.
Wow, yeah, well, you got a busy schedule. I'll definitely be at least a few
You're
of those
going to.
events, and I'll definitely be at all those weeks events. And I can't wait to collaborate with you and do all sorts of fun stuff again.
Yeah, the energy is going to be so spectacular. I know you're going to be in all of those. So look forward to seeing you there.
Awesome, awesome. So, Jagathi, I want to say thank you so much. What a great conversation. What an inspiration, not just to women, of course, to women, but also to everybody in this whole audience. Is keep giving back, coaching, mentoring. You're giving a gift. You really are. Keep doing it. Please keep doing it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Rob. And you're such a big support. Even this kind of avenue for us to share the message is going to be so helpful. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Jagathi. I want to say bye, everybody, and see you at all those events. Thank you for listening to What the Heck, Fintech. Make sure you tune into our next episode as we continue to interview fintech leaders and share real-world stories from across the fintech ecosystem so you can fully understand that fintech is fin life.